everybody. Good evening and welcome to Chilliteracy. Happy Wednesday. Hello everybody, how are we doing? I apparently am sneezing tonight and yawning. There we go. There's the yawn. I'm apparently sneezing tonight. Don't know why. But I just had about 3 sneezes in a row. Doing well. Hello everybody, how are we doing? I hope we are all well, and yes, indeed, happy giving of thanks to all our American buddies. My mum, in, I guess, sort of solidarity, made a pumpkin pie the other day. We had a big family, I say a big family, my family's not big, a family gathering, which was, I guess, sort of like a Thanksgiving thing, but not really. And my mum made a very nice pumpkin pie. So, yeah. But yes, hello everyone. How are we doing? You're just trying to get your work done quick? Yeah, holiday time. Woo! I hope holidays are good. You're mentally tired, Lady Mephistopheles, kind of crying at the amount of money you still need. Oh god, yes, of course, you'd be moving and all of that fun stuff and all the things that entails. Stay strong. Everything will get better eventually. It's basically all I can say about that. But yeah, pumpkin pie is your second favourite after pecan. Pecan is nice. Pecan pie is very good. I think the first time I had a pecan pie was... Now, if Sam's around, he will correct me. Was it... Or let me know which year it was. Was it last year or was it the year before we were at the Forge? Because it was then... And there's a very nice place in Bristol called Our Toots, and they do very nice pecan pie, and it was very nice. So yeah, you've never had pumpkin pie? Well, you're missing out. It was great. It probably wasn't 2023. Oof. Well, it was 2022 then, I guess. Pecan pie is great. But yes. Hello, Smallcock. Hello, Lady Mephistopheles. Hello, Queek the Geek. Hello, Andy Pants. Hello, Mary Moss. Hello, Angeline. Who have I missed? Oh, Sam. Parola. Hello. The Sims is real life. Oh god, yeah, the decorate the house part, the interior decoration of playing The Sims. If only it were that easy. That would be great. You get to see your 10-year-old nephew tomorrow. It's been 11 months, blimey. You miss him, I can imagine, after 11 months. The only 10-year-old I have any contact with is one of my pupils, and I hate him. February 2022. Blimey. Well, anyway, February 2022. That was indeed the first time I had pecan pie. Genuinely. Well, tell us how you really feel. No, I think I have complained about this little brat a few times. Pumpkin pie isn't a thing over there, but gingerbread in cake form. Ooh. Gingerbread in cake form? So like ginger cake, I guess. Ginger cake is great. So lives 500 miles away. Oh, okay, fair enough then. Yeah. And yeah, I think it was the first time I had pecan pie. The most difficult part of decorating your home when you first moved in was getting your parents to stop trying to do it for you. Oh dear. And I'm glad you have been looking forward to the continuation of the Ebony Box. Yay, Mary Moss. That is what we will be continuing with today. It might be a slightly shorter stream because this isn't a particularly... because I can't get my words out. This is not a particularly long story. But I think I managed to stop sort of vaguely halfway. We shall see. But words are indeed hard. Hard. There we go. Need to introduce chat to Parkin. Yes, Parkin's great. I had Parkin when I was up in Huddersfield. Was that last weekend? No, the weekend before last. I was in Huddersfield and had Parkin, and it was very nice. Bake me a gingerbread cake if I end up gigging it. Well, that's just like extra motivation for me to do more gigs in Poland. So, yeah. Wait, what? Are you making a joke, Sam? Oh, was that in response to me saying last weekend and you going, no, February 2022? Ah, okay. Yeah, it doesn't quite work in Twitch chat because of the delay. But I think I get what you were doing. Very good job. Excellent joke. Everybody clap, Sam. Sorry, I'm being sassy. We have a teabag question for you all. When was the last time something exceeded your expectations? What, as in food-wise or just generally? Google Parkin looks delicious. It is. It's very good. I was also very happy because... it doesn't say. Oh, okay. I was very happy because, again, when I was up in Huddersfield the other weekend, one of my colleagues is American and has never had Millionaire's shortbread. Now, for all you Brits in chat and people who know what Millionaire's shortbread is, this obviously needed to be rectified immediately as soon as we were in the UK. So myself and one of the other members of the group, we only bought one bit for her, but yeah, we got her a piece of Millionaire shortbread, and then amusingly her partner had also just bought her a piece of Millionaire shortbread too, so she had two. Luckily she tasted it and was like, why have I never had this before? This is amazing. So then she had a spare, so it was great. All worked out very well. There are two pictures in your living room, one with a skull and one with a bit of blood, and they tried so hard to get you to take them down because of what if people who might visit me YouTubers get scared. Oh dear. It is delicious. It is just shortbread, caramel and chocolate in that order. And the best, in my opinion, the best Millionaire shortbread is like, yeah, good quality, thick shortbread, a probably centimetre thick thing of centimetre thick spread of caramel, like good caramel, good sort of almost fudgy caramel, and then like a fairly thick but not like soggy layer of chocolate on the top that snaps when you bite into it. That is the perfect Millionaire shortbread. You know, I was surprised to not hate the William Orbit remix of Barber's Adagio for Strings the other night. Was that the thing that exceeded your expectations? Great. Look, I have a very open mind. Shush. Tempered chocolate for the win? Oh, absolutely. I think it exceeded mine. I don't think I had any expectations of it. Or maybe I did. Yeah, actually, no, that's fair. I did. I tend to have bad expectations of, you know, pop or otherwise remixes of classical... Excuse me. Of classical music. Because often it's just the piece, but an electric guitar is playing it and there's a beat behind it. It's like, you haven't really done anything with this. But yeah, this was pretty cool. I'm pretty sure I had heard it, or bits of it, maybe before. But it was very good. Speaking of music, you were listening to a reading playlist while diving into the Discworld, and it has some Sibelius on it, which was nice. Yes, Sibelius, my beloved. What Sibelius was it, do you know? Because if it was Sibelius 5, it is his best symphony. And I have been fighting my mum on this for many, many years because she thinks it's his second symphony, which is the best one, but she is wrong. It's implying that I'm a music snob. Me? I mean, I both am and am definitely not. I mean, the stuff I play as my job is, like, some of it can be called music to, like, the normal ear. Some of it, most normal people would go, that's just noise. So, I'm not sure necessarily that makes me a snob. That just makes me someone who makes weird sounding music. But, yeah. The Trees. Oh, I don't think I know that one. I will have to listen to that. But, from his piano music. Ah, yeah, you see, I don't know a lot of Sibelius's piano music. I should listen to it. That has prompted me to put that down on my to listen to list. Splendid. Thank you, Lady Mephistopheles. Sibelius, The Trees. That's a very Sibelius title. He liked his nature. And Finland are very proud of him. Quite rightly so. You don't think of me as a snob, you just know that a lot of that stuff can be very basic. A lot of what stuff? What, like pop music and things, or not? Hang on. You linked it. Oh, thank you. Yeah, like I try very hard not to be a music. Oh, dance remixes of classical pieces. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I am absolutely for people doing something interesting with a classical piece, but it's got to be, you know, you've got to have a reason for doing it, because it is a piece of music as it is. If you're going to add something interesting, go for it. But if you're literally just putting a beat behind it and playing it on a different instrument, no, that doesn't really interest me. Also, because as someone who arranges a lot of music, like when you're arranging something, you do actually want to put some kind of interesting take on it. You want to do something different with it. Oh, excuse me. And sometimes that is just like rejigging the instrumentation, because it's the kind of piece that if you do that, it will sound radically different. But then a lot of big orchestral pieces that, like, again, for example, my classic example that I always use for like for like dance remixes of classical music is Bach's Toccata and Fugue. It's just like everybody just does that with a beat and maybe on electric guitar, because turns out can actually sound fine, but everybody's done exactly the same thing, and it's like, yeah, great, all you are doing is putting a beat behind a banger of a tune anyway. You're not doing anything new with it. So yes, that annoys me. Also, his string quartet in D, opus 56 down the line. Nice. I probably have heard that, but I cannot think what it is. So obviously the person who compiled this playlist really knew his or her stuff, because Sibelius, he's my boy. I very much like Sibelius. Sibelius is best listened to, in my opinion, when you are driving or on a plane or just travelling somewhere and you have a cool, amazing, beautiful view. Because, like, that's what he wrote. He wrote landscapes, in my opinion. I'm someone who, like, when I listen to music, I'm quite a visual. I visualize things. It's a playlist compiled by Spotify. Oh, good for them. Nice. No, I don't think I can ever say good for Spotify. But, you know, I'm glad it's got some cool stuff on it. But, yeah, like, every time I listen to Sibelius, I just see landscapes, because it turns out it's kind of what he was going for. And everything needs more Vivaldi. Yeah, Vivaldi, I've probably said on Chillitracy before, but when Sam and I were sort of like first talking, we shared various playlists on Spotify. Sam's was, what was it? Just a lot of music I like, or something like that, which was a great title for a playlist. And mine, because he mentioned he liked Vivaldi, I was like, well, in that case, I'm going to make you a Vivaldi playlist, for I am a nerd. And I called it Vivaldi the Rad Priest, because I'm very funny, and they're not going to be everybody who gets that in chat. But for anyone who does, I will wait, and then I shall explain. Used to really like the film Street Dance 3D, a bit of a spoiler, combined with typical music, yeah, classical songs. That was super interesting. Oh, nice. That's cool. I'm going to be pedantic and say it's classical pieces, because songs are specifically things that are sung with words. I know, I'm an arse. Love that title? Yes, thank you. Thank you. I was very proud of it, because Vivaldi was ginger and therefore used to be called the Red Priest. That was his little nickname. So I thought Vivaldi the Rad Priest was rather good. So, nerd. Yeah, I know. Holy Snoot. Oh my god, Holy Snoot is great. That's a fantastic saying. I shall use that in my everyday life. That's the one. Yeah, lots of, I mean, it's the reason a lot of people say, like, a lot of people say music they listen to as songs, and that's literally just because we as a modern society pretty much only listen to songs. Like, most people listen to pop songs or rock songs or whatever that are sung. They have lyrics, they have words. That is pretty much the main form of music that most people consume. However, historically, that ain't... I mean, film music is another good example. Like, you shouldn't say, I love the song concerning hobbits from the soundtrack for Lord of the Rings, because, no, it hasn't got any words. To be a song, it must be sung. So a piece of music is all the stuff that ain't sung, basically. That's your bit of, I guess, not even classical music trivia, frankly, just music trivia. You're trying to avoid swearing. Oh, okay, fair enough. And that is indeed why it's pieces instead of songs. And that is why you get pedants like me. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a pedant, but you do get some really arsey people who are snobs going, oh my god, you're calling everything a song? You don't know anything. It's a piece. And I was like, well, no, it's just because people consume songs as their main sort of musical bread and butter at the moment in this day and age. Like, most people listen to stuff with words now. So when a band uses singing in practically every single song they ever make, but then there's one on the album without any singing, would that then not be a song but a piece? I guess technically, yeah. If it's just instrumental, technically that's a piece. Although with folk music, often if it's basically a song that would normally be sung and with words, then technically that's still a song. But yeah, an instrumental would most likely be the thing that it would be called, especially on a modern album. You're saying you need a new category on the TLJ wiki specifically for the instrumental version of Anne Louise. Well, no, because Anne Louise has words. So technically it's still a song. But it's basically stuff that has been written without the idea that it has words somehow or is going to be sung. Like, Anne Louise was written as a song. It is meant to be sung. There are words to it. And it's just not being sung in that particular instance. So it's an instrumental version of a song. They also have interludes. Interludes usually are bits between things. That really narrows it down. A track as a general purpose descriptor is... Well, that's funny as well, isn't it? Because that's a modern thing. You would never say track until we had, digital things. Actually, yeah, that's a good thought. Anyone who fancies, researching this, I'd be intrigued to know whether track... where the term track comes from. There were tracks on tape. Yeah, well, that's what I'm... 8-track tapes. Ah. See, I knew someone would know. Why 4-track? What's the etymology of track? I assume it's something like literally, physically, there was some kind of track involved. But yeah, probably something mechanical. Yeah, exactly. Words are cool, guys. Did you know? It's almost like this is a reading stream. We like words here. Anyway, I've realised I've rabbited on for rather a long time. So would we like to carry on with the Ebony Box? You're not sure if that's where it originated. Basically, yeah, on a tape it's physically arranged in rows. Oh, that makes sense then. Neat. Like stripes running the length of the tape. Nice. Turns out Andy has a lot of really random general knowledge. But it's great. Let's find the box, indeed. So, last time on the Ebony Box, there is a box. ADHD! Yup. Yes, last time on the Ebony Box, there was a box. It was filled with guineas. It was lost. And then, upon, rejigging the house, it fell out of a bureau because it was stuck in the back. So they found the box again, And now it's gone again. So, yeah. And basically a young lawyer has been just accused of stealing it. And it's all a bit vague. We're not sure what's going on. It's a very slippery box, it is. So, yeah. If we all recall, basically he was in the room with one other person, and then she gathered these curtains up and went to put them upstairs or something, and he was left alone with the box. And then he went out of the room and the box was no longer there, and he said he didn't see it. So, suspicious. But anyway, he's basically been remanded on bail, and he needs to, basically people need to give evidence, so we shall see what's going on. Also, this guy is called Sam, so apologies to Sam if I keep on saying Sam and you feel called out. So if we are all sitting comfortably, we shall continue with The Ebony Box by Ellen Wood. Chapter 3. I'm sure you might have thought all his rickyards were on fire by the way old Jacobson came bursting in. It was Saturday morning, and we were at breakfast at Dyke Manor. He had run every step of the way from Elm Farm, 2 miles nearly, not having patience to wait for his gig, and came in all excitement, the Worcester Herald in his hand. The squire started from his chair. Mrs. Todd-Hetley, then in the act of pouring out a cup of coffee, let it flow over onto the tablecloth. "What on earth's amiss, Jacobson?" cried the squire. "Aye, what's amiss?" stuttered Jacobson in answer. "This is amiss," holding out the newspaper. "I'll prosecute the editor as sure as I'm a living man. It's a conspiracy got up to sell it, a concocted lie. It can't be anything else, you know, Todd-Hetley. And I want you to go off with me to Worcester. The gig's following me." When we had somewhat collected our senses and could look at the newspaper, there was the account as large as life. Samson Reginald Dean had been had up before the magistrates on Thursday morning on a charge of stealing a small box of carved ebony containing 60 guineas in gold from the dwelling house of lawyer Cockermouth, and he was to be brought up again that day, Saturday, for examination. "A pretty thing this is to see when a man opens his weekly newspaper at his breakfast table," gasped Jacobson, flicking the report with his angry finger. "I'll have the law on them, accusing my nephew of such a thing as that. You'll go with me, squire." "Go? Of course I'll go," returned the squire in his hot partisanship. "We were going to Worcester anyway. I've got things to do there. Poor Sam. Hanging would be too good for the printers of that newspaper, Jacobson." Mr. Jacobson's gig was heard driving up to the gate at railroad speed, and soon our own carriage was ready. Old Jacobson sat with the squire, I behind with Giles, the other groom Blossom drove Todd in the gig, and away we went in the blustering March wind. Many people, farmers and others, were on the road, riding or driving to Worcester Market. Well, we found it was true, and not the mistake of the newspapers. They had but reported what passed before the magistrates at the town hall. The first person we saw was Miss Cockermouth. She was in a fine way, not knowing what to think or believe, and sat in the parlour in that soft green gown of twilled silk that might have been a relic of the silk made in the time of the Queen of Sheba, her cap and front all awry. Rumour said old Jacobson had been a sweetheart of hers in their young days, but I'm sure I don't know. Anyway, they were very friendly with one another, and she sometimes called him Frederick. He sat down by her on the horsehair sofa, and we took chairs. She recounted the circumstances, ramblingly, from beginning to end. Not that the end had come yet by a long way. And there it was, she wound up when the narrative was over. The box had disappeared, just for all the world as mysteriously as it disappeared in the days gone by. Mr. Jacobson had listened patiently. He was a fine, upright man, with a healthy colour and bright dark eyes. He wore a blue frock coat today with metal buttons and top boots. And yet he did not see how they had got up grounds for accusing Sam, and he said so. "To be sure," cried the squire. "How's that, Miss Betty?" "Why, it's this way," said Miss Betty, "that nobody was here in the parlour but Sam when the box vanished. It is my brother Charles who has done it all. He is so passionate, you know. John has properly quarrelled with him for it." "It is not possible, you know, Miss Betty, that Sam Dean could have done it," struck in Todd, who was boiling over with rage at the whole thing. "Some thief must have stolen it at the street door when Sam had left the room." "Well, no, that could hardly have been, seeing that Charles never left the street door after that," returned Miss Betty mildly. "It appears to be certain fact that not a soul entered the room after the young man left it. And there lies the puzzle of it." Putting it to be as Miss Betty put it, and I may as well say here that nothing turned up then or later to change the opinion, it looked rather suspicious for Sam Dean. I think the squire saw it. "I suppose you are sure the box was on the table when you left the room, Miss Betty?" said he. "Why, of course I am sure, squire," she answered. "It was the last thing my eyes fell on, for as I went through the door I glanced back to see that I had left the table tidy. Susan can bear witness to that. Dutton, the police sergeant, thinks some demon of mischief must be in that box, meaning the deuce, you know. Upon my word, it looks like it." Susan came in with some glasses and ale as Miss Betty spoke, and confirmed the testimony, which did not need confirmation. As she closed the parlour door, she said, after her mistress had passed out, she noticed the box standing on the table. "Is Sam here today in the office?" asked Mr. Jacobson. "Oh, my goodness, no!" cried Miss Betty in a fluster. "Why, Frederick, he has not been here since Thursday, when they had him up at the Guildhall. He couldn't well come while the charge is hanging over him." "Then I think we had better go out to find Sam and hear what he has to say," observed Mr. Jacobson, drinking up his glass of ale. "Yes, do," said Miss Betty. "Tell poor Sam I'm as sorry as I can be, pestered almost out of my mind over it. And as to their having found one of the guineas in his pocket, please just mention to him that I say it might have slipped in accidentally." "One of the guineas found in Sam's pocket?" exclaimed Mr. Jacobson, taken aback. "Well, I hear so," responded Miss Betty. "The police searched him, you see." As the squire and Mr. Jacobson went out, Mr. Cockermouth was coming in. They all turned into the office together, while we made a rush to Sam Dean's lodgings in Edgar Street, as much of a rush, at least, as the Saturday's streets would let us make. Sam was out, the young servant said when we got there, and while parleying with her, Mrs. Parslet opened her sitting-room door. "I do not suppose Mr. Dean will be long," she said. "He has to appear at the town hall this morning, and I think it likely he will come home first. Will you walk in and wait?" She handed us into her parlour, where she had been busy, marking sheets and pillowcases and towels with prepared ink. The table was covered with them. Todd began telling her that Mr. Jacobson was at Worcester, and went on to say what a shame it was that Sam Dean should be accused of this thing. "We consider it so," said Mrs. Parslet, who was a capable, pleasant-speaking woman, tall and slender. "My husband says it has upset Mr. Cockermouth more than anything that has occurred for years past. He tells his brother that he should have it investigated privately, not have given Mr. Dean into custody." "Then why did he let him do it, Mrs. Parslet?" She looked at Todd, as if surprised at the question. "Mr. Cockermouth knew nothing of it. You may be sure of that. Captain Cockermouth had the young man at the Guildhall and was preferring the charge before Mr. Cockermouth heard a word of what was agate. Certainly that is a most mysterious box. It seems fated to give trouble." At this moment the door opened, and a young lady came into the parlour. It was Maria. What a nice face she had. Excuse me. What sweet, thoughtful eyes, what gentle manners. Sam's friends in the town were accusing him of being in love with her, and small blame to him. But Sam did not appear to be coming home, and time was getting on. Todd decided not to wait longer, and said good morning. Flying back along High Street, we caught sight of the tray of Dublin buns just put fresh on the counter in Roos's shop, and made as good a feast as time allowed. Some people called them doubling buns, from their shape I take it, and I don't know to this day which was right. Away with fleet foot again, past the bustle round the town hall and market house, till we came to the next confectioner's and saw the apple tarts. Perhaps somebody remembers yet how delicious those apple tarts were. Bounding in, we began upon them. While the feast was in progress, Sam Dean went by, walking very fast. We dashed out to catch him. Good Mrs. Mountford chanced to be in the shop and knew us, or they might have thought we were decamping without payment. Sam Dean, in answer to Todd's hasty questions, went into a passion, swearing at the world in general, and Captain Cockermouth in particular, as freely as though the justices, then taking their places in the Guildhall, were not as good as within earshot. "It's a fearful shame, Todd Hetley, to bring such a charge against me, and to lug me up to the criminal bar like a felon. Worse than all, to let it go forth to the town and county in today's glaring newspapers that I, Sam Dean, am a common thief." "Of course it is a fearful shame, Sam. It's infamous, and all your friends know it is," cried Todd with eager sympathy. "My father wishes he could hang the printers. I say, what do you think has become of the box?" "Become of it? Why, that blundering Charles Cockermouth has got it. He was off his head with excitement at its being found. He must have come into the room and put it somewhere and forgotten it, or else he put it into his pocket and got robbed of it in the street. That's what I think. Quite off his head, I give you my word." "And what fable is it the wretches have got up about finding one of the guineas in your pocket, Sam?" "Oh, bother that. It was my own guinea. I swear it. There. I can't stay now," went on Sam, striding off down High Street. "I'm due at the town hall this minute, only out on bail. You'll come with me?" "You go in and pay for the tarts, Johnny," called back Todd as he put his arm within Sam Dean's. I looked in, pitched a shilling on the counter, said I didn't know how many we had eaten, perhaps 10, and that I couldn't wait for change. Crushing my way amidst the market women and their baskets in the Guildhall yard, I came upon Austin Chance. His father held some post connected with the law as administered there, and Austin said he would get me in. "Can it be true that the police found one of the guineas about him?" I asked. Chance pulled a long face. "It's true they found one when they searched him." "What right had they to search him?" "Well, I don't know," said Austin, laughing a little. "They did it. To see perhaps whether all the guineas were about him. And I am afraid, Johnny Ludlow, that the finding of that guinea will make it rather hard for Sam. It is said that Maria Parslet can prove the guinea was Sam's own, and that my father has a summons served on her to appear here today. He has taken Sam's case in hand, but he is closer than wax, and tells me nothing." "You don't think he can have stolen the box, Chance?" "I don't. I shouldn't think him capable of anything so mean, let alone the danger of it. Not but that there are circumstances in the case that tell uncommonly strong against him. And where the deuce the box could have got to otherwise is more than mortal man can guess at. Come along. Chapter 4. Not for a long while had Worcester been stirred as it was over this affair of Samson Dean's. What with the curious discovery of the box of guineas after its mysterious disappearance of years, and then its second no less mysterious loss, with the suspicion that Sam Dean stole it, the faithful city was so excited as hardly to know whether it stood on its head or its heels. When the police searched the prisoner on Thursday morning, after taking him into custody, and found the guinea upon him, having been told that he had one about him, his guilt was thought to be as good as proved. Sam said the guinea was his own, an heirloom, and stood to this so indignantly resolute that the police let him have it back. But now what did Sam go and do? When released upon bail by the magistrates, to come up again on the Saturday, he went straight off to a silversmith's, had a hole stamped in the guinea and hung it to his watch chain across his waistcoat, that the public might feast their eyes upon it. It was in this spirit of defiance, or, as the town called it, bravado, that he met the charge. His lodgings had been searched for the rest of the guineas, but they were not found. The hour for the Saturday's examination, 12 o'clock, was striking, as I struggled my way with Austin Chance through the crush round the Guildhall. But that Austin's father was a man of consequence with the doorkeepers, we should not have got in at all. The accused, arraigned by his full name, Samson Reginald Dean, stood in the place allotted to prisoners, cold defiance on his handsome face. As near to him as might be permitted stood Todd, just as defiant as he. Captain Charles Cockermouth, a third in defiance, stood opposite to prosecute, while Lawyer Cockermouth, who came in with Sam's uncle, Sam's uncle, Mr. Jacobson, openly wished his brother at Hanover. Squire Todd Hetley, being a county magistrate, sat on the bench with the city magnates, but not to interfere. The proceedings began. Captain Cockermouth related how the little box, his property, containing 60 golden guineas, was left on the table in a sitting-room in his brother's house, the accused being the only person in the room at the time, and that the box disappeared. He himself, standing at the front door, saw the accused quit the room. He went into it almost immediately, but the box was gone. He swore that no person entered the room after the prisoner left it. Miss Betty Cockermouth, flustered and red, appeared next. She testified that she was in the room nearly all the morning, the little box being upon the table. When she left the room, Mr. Dean remained in it alone, copying a letter for her brother. The box was still on the table. Susan Edwards, housemaid at Lawyer Cockermouth's, spoke to the same fact. It was she who had fetched her mistress out, and she saw the box standing upon the table. The accused was asked by one of the magistrates what he had to say to this. He answered, speaking freely, that he had nothing to say in contradiction, except that he did not know what became of the box. "Did you see the box on the table?" asked the lawyer on the opposite side, Mr. Stand-up. "I saw it there when I first went into the room. Miss Betty made a remark about the box which drew my attention to it. I was sitting at the far end of the room at Mr. Cockermouth's little desk table. I did not notice the box afterwards." "Did you not see it there after Miss Cockermouth left the room?" "No, I did not. Not that I remember," answered Sam. "Truth to say, I never thought about it. My attention was confined to the letter I was copying, to the exclusion of everything else." "Did anyone come into the room after Miss Cockermouth left it?" "No one came into it. Somebody opened the door and looked in." This was fresh news. The town hall pricked up its ears. "I do not know who it was," added Sam. "My head was bent over my writing when the door opened quickly and as quickly shut again. I supposed somebody had looked in to see if Mr. or Miss Cockermouth was there, and had retreated on finding they were not. Could that person, whomsoever it might be, have advanced to the table and taken the box? Asked the chief of the magistrates. No, sir. For certain, no. And Sam's tone here, he best knew why, was aggravatingly defiant. The person might have put his head in, and no doubt did, but he did not set a foot inside the room. Captain Cockermouth was asked about this, whether he observed anyone go to the parlour and look in. He protested till he was nearly blue with rage, for he regarded it as Sam's invention that such a thing never took place, that no one whatever went near the parlour door. Next came the question of the guinea, which was hanging from his watch-guard, shining and bold as if it had been brass. Sam had been questioned about this by the justices on Thursday, and his statement in answer to them was just as bold as the coin. Turned over 2 pages. The guinea had been given him by his late father's uncle, old Thomas Dean, who had jokingly enjoined him never to change it, always to keep it by him, and then he would never be without money. Sam had kept it from that time to this. He kept it in the pocket of an old-fashioned leather case, which contained some letters from his father, and 2 or 3 other things he valued. No, he was not in the habit of getting the guinea out to look at it. He had retorted to a little badgering, had not looked at it, or at the case either, which lay in the bottom of his trunk, for months and months. Yes, it might be years for all he recollected. But on the Tuesday evening, when talking with Miss Parslet about guineas, he fetched it to show to her, and slipped it into his pocket afterwards, where the police found it on the Thursday. This was the substance of his first answer, and he repeated it now. "Do you know who is said to be the father of lies, young man?" asked Justice Whitewicker in a solemn tone, suspecting that the prisoner was telling an out-and-out fable. "I have heard," answered Sam. "Have never seen him myself. Perhaps you have, sir." At which a titter went round the court, and it put his worship's back up. Sam went on to say that he had often thought of taking his guinea into wear, and had now done it, and he gave the guinea a flick in the face of us all. Evidently little good could come of a hardened criminal like this, and Justice Whitewicker, who thought nothing on earth so grand as the sound of his own voice from the bench, gave Sam a piece of his mind. In the midst of this, a stir arose at the appearance of Maria Parslet. Mr. Chance led her in. Her father, sad and shrinking as usual, walked behind them. Lawyer Cockermouth, and I liked him for it, made a place for his clerk next to himself. Maria looked modest, gentle, and pretty. She wore black silk, being in slight mourning, and a dainty white bonnet. Mr. Dean was asked to take tea with them in the parlour on the Tuesday evening, as a matter of convenience, Maria's evidence ran, in answer to questions, and she briefly alluded to the reason why. Whilst waiting together, he and she, for her father to come in, Mr. Dean told her of the finding of the ebony box of guineas at Mr. Cockermouth's. She laughingly remarked that a guinea was an out-of-date coin now, and she was not sure that she had ever seen one. In reply to that, Mr. Dean said he had one by him, given him by an old uncle some years before, and he went upstairs and brought it down to show to her. There could be no mistake, Maria added to Mr. Whitewicker, who wanted to insinuate a word of doubt, and her sweet brown eyes were honest and true as she said it. She had touched the guinea and held it in her hand for some moments. "Held it and touched it, did you, Miss Parslet?" retorted Lawyer Stand-up. Pray, what appearance had it?" "It was a thin, worn coin, sir," replied Maria. "Thinner, I think, than a sovereign, but somewhat larger. It seemed to be worn thin at the edge." "Whose image was on it? What king's?" "George III's. I noticed that." "Now, don't you think, young lady, that the accused took this marvellous coin from his pocket instead of from some receptacle above stairs?" went on Mr. Stand-up. "I am quite sure he did not take it from his pocket when before me," answered Maria. "He ran upstairs quickly, saying he would fetch the guinea. He had nothing in his hands then." Upon this, Lawyer Chance inquired of his learned brother why he need waste time in useless questions, begging to remind him that it was not until Wednesday morning the box disappeared, so the prisoner could not well have had any of its contents about him on Tuesday. "Just let my questions alone, will you?" retorted Mr. Stand-up with a nod. "I know what I am about. Now, Miss Parslet, please attend to me. Was the guinea you profess to have seen a perfect coin, or was there a hole in it?" "It was a perfect coin, sir." "And what became of it?" "I think Mr. Dean put it in his waistcoat pocket. I did not particularly notice. Quite close upon that my father came home, and we sat down to tea." "No, sir, nothing was said to my father about the guinea. If it was, I did not hear it. But he and Mr. Dean talked of the box of guineas that had been found." "Who was it that called while you were at tea?" "Young Mr. Chance called. We had finished tea then, and Mr. Dean took him upstairs to his own sitting-room." "I am not asking you about young Mr. Chance. We shall come to him presently," was the rough-toned but not ill-natured retort. "Somebody else called. Who was it?" Maria, blushing and paling ever since she stood up to the ordeal, grew white now. "Mr. Badger had called at the door," she answered, "and Mr. Dean went out to speak to him." Worried by Lawyer Stand-up as to whether he did not come to ask for money, she said she believed so, but she did not hear all they said. Quiet Mr. Parslet was the next witness. He had to acknowledge that he did not hear it. Mr. Badger appeared to be pressing for some money owing to him, could not tell the amount, knew nothing about that. When questioned whether the accused owed him money, Parslet said not a shilling. Mr. Dean had never sought to borrow of him, and had paid his monthly accounts regularly. Upon that, Mr. Badger was produced, a thin man with a neck as stiff as a poker, who gave his reluctant testimony in a sweet tone of benevolence. Mr. Dean had been borrowing money from him for some time, somewhere about £20 he thought was owing now, including interest. He had repeatedly asked for its repayment, but had only got put off with, as he believed, lame excuses. Had certainly gone to ask for it on the Tuesday evening, was neither loud nor angry, oh dear no, but did tell the accused he thought he could give him some if he would, and did say that he must have a portion of it within a week, or he should apply to Mr. Jacobson of Elm Farm. Did not really mean to apply to Mr. Jacobson, had no wish to do anyone an injury, but felt vexed at the young man's off-handedness, which looked like indifference. Knew besides that Mr. Dean had other debts. Now I'll leave you to judge how this evidence struck on the ears of old Jacobson. He leaped to the conclusion that Sam had been going all sorts of ways, as he supposed he went when in London, and might be owing, the mischief only knew how much money, and he shook his fist at Sam across the justice-room. Mr. Stand-up next called young Chance, quite to young Chance's surprise, perhaps also to his father's. He was questioned upon no end of things, whether he did not know that the accused was owing a great deal of money, and whether the accused had shown any guinea to him when he was in Edgar Street on the Tuesday night. Austin answered that he believed Mr. Dean owed a little money, not a great deal, so far as he knew, and that he had not seen the guinea nor heard of it. And in saying all this, Austin's tone was just as resentfully insolent to Mr. Stand-up as he dared to make it. Well, it is of no use to go on categorically with the day's proceedings. When they came to an end, the magistrates conferred pretty hotly in a low tone amongst themselves, some apparently taking up one opinion as to Sam's guilt or innocence, and some the other. At length they announced their decision, and it was as follows. Although the case undoubtedly presents grave grounds of suspicion against the accused, Sampson Reginald Dean— "Very grave indeed," interjected Mr. Whitewicker solemnly. "We do not consider them to be sufficient to commit him for trial upon. Therefore we give him the benefit of the doubt, and discharge him. Should any further evidence transpire, he can be brought up again." "It was Maria Parslet's testimony about the guinea that cleared him," whispered the crowd as they filed out. "And I think it must have been. It was just impossible to doubt her truth, or the earnestness with which she gave it." Mr. Jacobson interviewed Sam, as the Americans say, and the interview was not a loving one. Being in the mood, he said anything that came uppermost. He forbade Sam to appear at Elm Farm again, ever, as long as oak and ash grew, and he added that as Sam was bent on going to the deuce head foremost, he might do it upon his own means, but that he'd never get any more help from him. The way the squire lashed up Bob and Blister when driving home, for, liking Sam hitherto, he was just as much put out as old Jacobson, and the duet they kept together in abuse of his misdeeds, was edifying to hear. Todd laughed. I did not. The gig was given over this return journey to the two grooms. "I do not believe Sam took the box, sir," I said to old Jacobson, interrupting a fiery oration. He turned round to stare at me. "What do you say, Johnny Ludlow? You do not believe he took the box?" "Well, to me it seems quite plain that he did not take it. I've hardly ever felt more sure of anything." "Plain?" struck in the squire. "How is it plain, Johnny? What grounds do you go upon?" "I judge by his looks and his tones, sir, when denying it. They are to be trusted." They did not know whether to laugh or scoff at me. It was Johnny's way, said the squire, always fancying he could read the riddles in a man's face and voice. But they'd have thrown up their two best market-going hats with glee to be able to think it true. And that is where we shall take a break. Thank you for listening. And no, I think we're good. But yes, the plot thickens. Hope you're enjoying so far. Just turning on your mob buttons? Right. Go do break-related things. Good night, Lady Mephistopheles. Sleep well. Dun dun dun, indeed. Yeah, go do break-related things, and we shall see you back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now. And we return. Welcome back, everybody. I hope we have had a good break and done break-related things. I have not done very much. I've basically just sat here because my eyes are wanting to close as I read, which is, turns out, not particularly conducive to reading. So, yeah. You keep thinking Young Chance is Adam Chance. Ha, nice. Ooh. Accidentally moving the mouse with my book. Let's not do that. Whoop. But yeah, you have gotten the bus. Excellent. Good for you, Andy. You got tea, Mary Moss. Excellent. Also good. But yeah. I'm gonna yawn a lot. Oh, excuse me. Apparently I'm tired, I guess. Might be because I spent most of my day today, and frankly yesterday as well, doing Christmas cards, because I do this to myself every year. I decide that I'm gonna do handmade Christmas cards for people, and yeah, I do them properly. I go all in, and most of the time I have to think of some kind of joke. So I basically do sort of, it's like a mini comic strip for a lot of it, or just like a comic, it's like scene, I guess, most of the time. Like for example, I can't remember what I did for Sam last year. Oh, there was a Destiny one I did for Sam last year. I did Telesto, which is a gun in Destiny, in sort of like Christmas colours and with tinsel around it, with the caption Telesto ho 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 ho. I disappoint myself sometimes. So yeah. And I have given myself a blister from colouring in, because I use like nice, the side, yep, I use nice, I've got a excellent set that was my dad's actually, of Derwent colour pencils, and learnt a few years back like the proper way to use colour pencils, which is you build up very thin layers of colour, you do all your shading, blah 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 blah, and then you what's called burnish it, by putting a paler colour over the top and you press a lot harder. So basically you set the colour in and it means that there's no white bits of the paper coming through. And for that you actually do need to press pretty hard. So I've given myself a blister. For I am a fool. You're trying to finish your work and get out of here, but people keep having heart attacks and pulmonary embolisms. Don't they know it's a holiday? Oh dear. Well, I hope those people are okay. Or will get to be okay. Very rude of them. How could they? But yes. If we are all sitting comfortably, shall we get to the bottom of this mystery? I think we shall. So, grab your tea, grab your whatevers, and we shall continue with the Ebony Box. Chapter 5. Samson Reginald Dean was relieved of the charge, as it was declared not proven. All the same, Samson Reginald Dean was ruined. Worcester said so. During the following week, which was Passion Week, its citizens talked more of him than of their prayers. Granted that Maria Parslet's testimony had been honestly genuine, a theory cropped up to counteract it. Lawyer Stand-Up had been bold enough to start it at the Saturday's examination. 100 tongues were repeating it now. Sam Dean, as may be remembered, was present at the finding of the box on Tuesday. He had come up the passage and touched the golden guineas in it with the tips of his fingers. Those fingers might have deftly extracted one of the coins. No wonder he could show it to Maria when he went home to tea. Captain Cockermouth admitted that in counting the guineas subsequently he had thought he counted 60, but as he knew there were, or ought to be, that number in the box, probably the assumption misled him, causing him to reckon them as 60 when in fact there were only 59, which was a bit of logic. Still, popular opinion was divided. If part of the town judged Sam to be guilty, part believed him to be innocent. A good deal might be said on both sides. To a young man who does not know how to pay his debts from lack of means, and the debts that he is afraid of, too, 60 golden guineas may be a great temptation, and people did not shut their eyes to that. It transpired also that Mr. Jacobson, his own uncle, his best friend, had altogether cast Sam off and told him he might now go to the dogs his own way. Sam resented it all bitterly, and defied the world. Far from giving in or showing any sense of shame, he walked about with an air, his head up, and that brazen guinea dangling in front of him. He actually had the face to appear at college on Good Friday, the congregation looking askance at him, and sat out the cold service of the day. No singing, no organ, and the little chorister boys in black surplices instead of white ones. But the crowning act of boldness was to come. Before Easter week had lapsed into the past, Sam Dean had taken 2 rooms in a conspicuous part of the town and set up in practice. A big brass plate on the outer door displayed his name, Mr. Dean, Attorney at Law. Sam's friends extolled his courage. Sam's enemies were amazed at his impudence. Captain Cockermouth prophesied that the ceiling of that office would come tumbling down on its crafty occupant's head. It was his gold that was paying for it. The Cockermouths, like the town, were divided in opinion. Mr. Cockermouth could not believe Sam guilty, although the mystery as to where the box could be puzzled him as few things had ever puzzled him in this life. He would fain have taken Sam back again, had it been a right thing to do. What the captain thought need not be enlarged upon. While Miss Betty felt uncertain, veering now to this belief, now to that, and much distressed either way. There is one friend in this world that hardly ever deserts us, and that is a mother. Mrs. Dean, a pretty little woman yet, had come flying to Worcester, ready to fight everybody in it on her son's behalf. Sam, of course, made his own tale good to her. Whether it was a true one or not, he alone knew. But not an angel from heaven could have stirred her faith in it. She declared that, to her positive knowledge, the old uncle had given Sam the guinea. It was understood to be Mrs. Dean who advanced the money to Sam to set up with. It was certainly Mrs. Dean who brought a shutting-up bed at Old Ward's, and a gridiron, and a teapot, and a three-legged table, and a chair or two, all for the back room of the little office, that Sam might go into housekeeping on his own account, and live upon 6pence a day, so to say, until business came in. To look at Sam's hopeful face, he meant to do it, and to live down the scandal. Looking at the thing impartially, one might perhaps see that Sam was not swayed by impudence in setting up, so much as by obligation. For what else lay open to him? No firm would engage him as a clerk with that doubt sticking to his coat-tails. He paid some of his debts, and undertook to pay the rest before the year was out. A whisper arose that it was Mrs. Dean who managed this. Sam's adversaries knew better. The funds came out of the Ebony Box. That, as Charles Cockermouth demonstrated, was as sure as heaven. But now there occurred one thing that I, Johnny Ludlow, could not understand, and never shall. Why Worcester should have turned its back like an angry drake upon Maria Parslet. The school, where she was resident teacher, wrote her a cool, polite note to say she need not trouble herself to return after the Easter recess. That example was followed. Pious individuals looked upon her as a possible storyteller, in danger of going to the bad in Sam's defence, nearly as much as Sam had gone. It was just a craze. Even Charles Cockermouth said there was no sense in blaming Maria. Of course Sam had deceived her when pretending to show the guinea as his own, just as he deceived other people. Next, the town called her bold for standing up in the face and eyes of the Guildhall to give her evidence. But how could Maria help that? It was not her own choice. She'd rather have locked herself up in the cellar. Lawyer Chance had burst in upon her that Saturday morning, not 10 minutes after we left the house, giving nobody warning, and carried her off imperatively, never saying, "Will you or won't you?" It was not his way. Placid Miss Betty was indignant when the injustice came to her ears. What did people mean by it? She wanted to know. She sent for Maria to spend the next Sunday in Foregate Street, and marched with her arm in arm to church, St. Nicholas's, morning and evening. As the days and the weeks passed, commotion gave place to a calm. Sam and his delinquencies were let alone. One cannot be on the grumble for ever. Sam's lines were pretty hard. Practice held itself aloof from him, and if he did not live upon the 6pence a day, he looked at every halfpenny that he had to spend beyond it. His face grew thin, his blue eyes wistful, but he smiled hopefully. "You keep up young Dean's acquaintance, I perceive," remarked Lawyer Chance to his son one evening as they were finishing dinner, for he had met the two young men together that day. "Yes, why shouldn't I?" returned Austin. "Think that charge was a mistaken one, I suppose?" "Well, I do, father. He has affirmed it to me in terms so unmistakable that I can but believe him. Besides, I don't think Dean, as I have always said, is the sort of fellow to turn rogue. I don't, indeed." "Does he get any practice?" "Very little, I'm afraid." Mr. Chance was a man with a conscience. On the whole, he felt inclined to think that Sam had not helped himself to the guineas, but he was by no means sure of it. Like Miss Betty Cockermouth, his opinion veered now on this side, now on that, like a haunted weathercock. If Sam was not guilty, why then, Fate had dealt hardly with the young fellow, and what would the end be? These thoughts were running through the lawyer's mind as he talked to his son and sat playing with his bunch of seals, which hung down by a short, thick gold chain in the old-fashioned manner. "I should like to say a word to him if he'd come to me," he suddenly cried. "You might go and bring him, Austin." "What, this evening?" exclaimed Austin. "Aye, why not? One time's as good as another." Austin Chance started off promptly for the new office, and found his friend presiding over his own tea-tray in the little back room, the loaf and butter on the table, and a red herring on the gridiron. "Hadn't time to get any dinner today, too busy," was Sam's apology, given briefly with the flush of the face. "Mr. Chance wants me. Well, I'll come. What is it for?" "Don't know," replied Austin, and away they went. The lawyer was standing at the window, his hands in the pockets of his pepper and salt trousers, tinkling the shillings and sixpences there. Austin supposed he was not wanted, and shut them in. "I have been thinking of your case a good bit lately, Sam Dean," began Mr. Chance, giving Sam a seat and sitting down himself, "and I should like to feel, if I can, more at a certainty about it, one way or the other." "Yes, sir," replied Sam, "and you must please to note that manners in those days had not degenerated to what they are in these. Young men, whether gentle or simple, addressed their elders with respect. Young women also." "Yes, sir," replied Sam, "but what do you mean about wishing to feel more at a certainty?" "When I defended you before the magistrates, I did my best to convince them that you were not guilty. You had assured me you were not, and they just discharged you. I believe my arguments and my pleadings went some way with them." "I have no doubt of it, sir, and I thanked you at the time with all my heart," said Sam warmly. "Some of my enemies were bitter enough against me." "But you should not speak in that way, calling people your enemies," reproved the lawyer. "People were only at enmity with you on the score of the offence. Look here, Sam Dean, did you commit it or did you not?" Sam stared. Mr. Chance had dropped his voice to a solemn key. His head was pushed forward. Gravity sat on his face. "No, sir. No." The short answer did not satisfy the lawyer. "Did you filch that box of guineas out of Cockermouth's room, or were you, and are you, as you assert, wholly innocent?" he resumed. "Tell me the truth as before heaven. Whatever it be, I will shield you still." Sam rose. "On my sacred word, sir, and before heaven, I have told nothing but the truth. I did not take or touch the box of guineas. I do not know what became of it." Mr. Chance regarded Sam in silence. He had known young men, when under a cloud, prevaricate in a most extraordinary and unblushing manner. To look at them and listen to them, one might have said they were fit to be canonized. But he thought truth lay with Sam now. Sit down, Dean," he said. "I am glad to believe you. Where the deuce could the box have got to? It could not take flight through the ceiling up to the clouds, or down to the earth through the floor. Whose hands took it?" "The box went in one of two ways," returned Sam. "If the captain did not fetch it out, unconsciously, and lose it in the street, why, somebody must have entered the parlour after I left it and carried off the box. Perhaps the individual who looked into the room when I was sitting there." "A pity but you had noticed who that was." "Yes, it is. Look here, Mr. Chance. A thought has more than once struck me. If that person did not come back and take the box, why has he not come forward openly and honestly to avow it was himself who looked in?" The lawyer gave his head a dissenting shake. "It is a ticklish thing to be mixed up in, he may think. One that he had best keep out of. Though he may be innocent as the day. How are you getting on?" he asked, passing abruptly from the subject. "Oh, middling," replied Sam. "As well, perhaps, as I should expect to get on at first, with all the prejudice abroad against me." "Earning bread and cheese?" "Not quite, yet." "Well, see here, Dean, and this is what I chiefly sent for you to say, if you could assure me on your conscience you deserved it. I may be able to put some little business in your hands. Petty matters are brought to us that we hardly care to waste time upon. I'll send them to you in future. I dare say you'll be able to rub on by dint of patience. Rome was not built in a day, you know." "Thank you, sir. I thank you very truly," breathed Sam. "Mr. Cockermouth sent me a small matter the other day. If I can make a bare living of it at present, that's all I ask. Fame and fortune are not rained down upon black sheep." Which was so true a remark as to need no contradiction. May was nearing its close then, and the summer evenings were long and lovely. As Sam went forth from the interview, he thought he would take a walk by the river instead of turning into his solitary rooms. Since entering upon them he had been as steady as old time. The accusation and its attendant shame seemed to have converted him from a heedless, youthful man into a wise old sage of age and care. Passing down Broad Street towards the bridge, he turned to the left and sauntered along beside the Severn. The water glittered in the light of the setting sun. Barges, some of them bearing men and women and children, passed smoothly up and down on it. The opposite fields towards St. John's were as green as an emerald. All things seemed to wear an aspect of brightness. All of a sudden things grew brighter, and Sam's pulse gave a leap. He had passed the grand old red-stoned wall that enclosed the bishop's palace, and was close upon the gates leading up to the green, when a young lady turned out of them and came towards him with a light, quick step. It was Maria Parslet, in a pretty summer muslin, a straw hat shading her blushing face. For it did blush furiously at the sight of Sam. "Mr. Dean! Maria!" She began to say hurriedly that her mother had sent her with a message to the dressmaker on the parade, and she had taken that way as being the shortest, as if in apology for having met Sam. He turned with her, and they paced slowly along, side by side, the colour on Maria's cheeks coming and going with every word he spoke and every look he gave her, which seemed altogether senseless and unreasonable. Sam told her of his conversation with Austin Chance's father, and his promise to put a few things in his way. "Once let me be making 200 a year, Maria, and then—" "Then what?" questioned Maria innocently. "Then I should ask you to come to me, and we'd risk it together." "Risk what?" stammered Maria, turning her head right round to watch a barge that was being towed by. "Risk our luck. 200 a year is not so bad to begin upon. I should take the floor above as well as the ground floor I rent now, and we should get along. Anyway, I hope to try it." "Oh, Mr. Dean." "Now, don't Mr. Dean me, young lady, if you please. Why, Maria, what else can we do? A mean, malicious set of dogs and cats have turned their backs upon us both. The least we should do is to see if we can't do without them. I know you'd rather come to me than stay in Edgar Street." Maria held her tongue as to whether she would or not. "Mamma is negotiating to get me a situation at Cheltenham," she said. "You will not go to Cheltenham or anywhere else if I get any luck," he replied dictatorially. "Life would look very blue to me now without you, Maria, and many a man and wife rolling in riches at the end have rubbed on with less than 200 a year at the beginning. I wouldn't say mind, but we might risk it on 150. My rent is low, you see." Yes," stammered Maria, "but I wish that mystery of the guineas could be cleared up." Sam stood still, turned, and faced her. "Why do you say that? You are not suspecting that I took them?" "Oh dear, no!" returned Maria, losing her breath. "I know you did not take them. Could not. I was only thinking of your practice. So much more would come in." "Cockermouth has sent me a small matter or two. I think I shall get on," repeated Sam. They were at their journey's end by that time, at the dressmaker's door. "Good evening," said Maria, timidly holding out her hand. Sam Dean took it and clasped it. "Goodbye, my darling. I am going home to my bread and cheese supper, and I wish you were there to eat it with me." Maria sighed. She wondered whether that wonderful state of things would ever come to pass. Perhaps no. Perhaps yes. Meanwhile, no living soul knew aught of these treasonable aspirations. They were a secret between her and Sam. Mr. and Mrs. Parslet suspected nothing. Time went on. Lawyer Chance was as good as his word, and put a few small matters of business into the hands of Sam Dean. Mr. Cockermouth did the same. The town came down upon him for it, though it let Chance alone, who was not the sort of man to be dictated to. "Well," said Cockermouth in answer, "I don't believe the lad is guilty. Never have believed it. Had he been of a dishonest turn, he could have helped himself before, for a good deal of my cash passed at times through his hands. And given that he was innocent, he has been hardly dealt by." Sam Dean was grateful for these stray windfalls, and returned his best thanks to the lawyers for them. But they did not amount to much in the aggregate, and a gloomy vision began to present itself to his apprehension of being forced to give up the struggle, and wandering out in the world to seek a better fortune. The summer assizes drew near. Sam had no grand cause to come on at them, or small one either, but it was impossible not to give a thought now and again, to what his fate might have been, had he stood committed to take his trial at them. The popular voice said that was only what he merited. Chapter 6. The assizes were held and passed. One hot day, when July was nearing its meridian, word was brought to Miss Cockermouth, who was charitable, that a poor sick woman whom she befriended was worse than usual, so she put on her bonnet and cloak to pay her a visit. The bonnet was a huge leghorn, which shaded her face well from the sun, its trimming of straw colour, and the cloak was of thin black taffeta, edged with narrow lace. It was a long walk on a hot afternoon, for the sick woman lived but just on this side Henwick. Miss Betty had got as far as the bridge, and was about to cross it, when Sam Dean, coming over it at a strapping pace, ran against her. "Miss Betty!" he cried, "I beg your pardon." Miss Betty brought her bonnet from under the shade of her large grass-green parasol. "Dear me, is it you, Sam Dean?" she said. "Were you walking for a wager?" Sam laughed a little. "I was hastening back to my office, Miss Betty. I have no clerk, you know, and a client might come in." Miss Betty gave her head a twist, something between a nod and a shake. She noticed the doubtful tone in the might. "Very hot, isn't it?" said she. "I'm going up to see that poor Hester Knowles. She's uncommon bad, I hear." "You'll have a warm walk?" "Aye." "Are you pretty well, Sam? You look thin." "Do I? Oh, that's nothing but the heat of the weather. I'm quite well, thank you. Good afternoon, Miss Betty." She shook his hand heartily. One of Sam's worst enemies, who might have run in a curricle with Charles Cockermouth as to an out-and-out belief in his guilt, was passing at the moment, and saw it. Miss Betty crossed the bridge, turned off into Turkey, for it was through those classical regions that her nearest and coolest way lay, and so onwards to the sick woman's room. There she found the blazing July sun streaming in at the wide window, which had no blind, no shelter whatever from it. Miss Betty had had enough of the sun out of doors without having it in. Done up with the walk and the heat, she sat down on the first chair and felt ready to swoon right off. "Dear me, Hester, this is bad for you," she gasped. "Did you mean the sun, ma'am?" asked the sick woman, who was sitting full in it, wrapped in a blanket or two. "It is a little hot just now, but I don't grumble at it. I'm so cold mostly. As soon as the sun goes off the window, I shall begin to shiver." "Well a day," responded Miss Betty, wishing she could be cool enough to shiver. "But if you feel it cold now, Hester, what will you do when the autumn winds come on?" "Ah, ma'am, please do not talk of it. I just can't tell what I shall do. That window don't fit tight, and the way the wind pours in through it upon me as I sit here at evening or lie in my little bed there passes belief. I'm coughing always then." "You should have some good thick curtains put up," said Miss Betty, gazing at the bare window, which had a pot of musk on its sill. "Woolen ones." The sick woman smiled sadly. She was very poor now, though it had not always been so. She might as well have hoped to buy the sun itself as woolen curtains, or cotton curtains either. Miss Betty knew that. "I'll think about it, Hester, and see if I've any old ones that I could let you have. I'm not sure, but I'll look," repeated she, and began to empty her capacious dimity pockets of a few items of good things she had brought. By and by, when she was a little cooler and had talked with Hester, Miss Betty set off home again, her mind running upon the half-promised curtains. "They are properly shabby," thought she as she went along, "but they'll serve to keep the sun and the wind off her." She was thinking of those warm green curtains that she had picked the braid from that past disastrous morning, as the reader heard of, and all the town as well. Nothing had been done with them since. Getting home, Miss Betty turned into the parlour. Susan, who had not yet found leisure to fix any time for her wedding, found her mistress fanning her hot face, her bonnet untied and tilted back. "I've been to see that poor Hester Knowles, Susan," began Miss Betty. "Law, ma'am," interposed Susan, "what a walk for you this scorching afternoon, all up that wide new road." "You may well say that, girl, but I went Turkey way. She's very ill, poor thing, and that's a frightfully staring window of hers, the sun on it like a blazing fire, and not as much as a rag for a blind, and the window don't fit, she says, and in cold weather the biting wind comes in and shivers her up. I think I might give her those shabby old curtains, Susan, that were up in Mr. Phillip's room, you know, before we got the new chintz ones in." "So you might, ma'am," said Susan, who was not a bad-hearted girl, excepting to the baker's man. "They can't go up at any of our windows as they be, and if you had 'em dyed, I don't know as they'd answer much, being so shabby." "I put them, let me see, into the spare ottoman, didn't I? Yes, that was it, and there I suppose they must be lying still." "Sure enough, Miss Betty," said Susan. "I've not touched 'em." "Nor I," said Miss Betty. "With all the trouble that got into our house at that time, I couldn't give my mind to seeing after the old things, and I've not thought about them since. Come upstairs with me now, Susan. We'll see what sort of a state they are in." They went up, and Miss Betty took off her bonnet and cloak and put her cap on. The spare ottoman, soft and red and ancient, used as a receptacle for odds and ends that were not wanted, stood in a spacious linen closet on the first-floor landing. It was built out over the back door and had a skylight above. Susan threw back the lid of the ottoman, and Miss Betty stood by. The faded old brown curtains, green once, lay in a heap at one end, just as Miss Betty had hastily flung them in that past day in March, when on her way to look at the chintzes. "They're in a fine rabble, seemingly," observed Susan, pausing to regard the curtains. "Dear me," cried Miss Betty, conscience-stricken, for she was a careful housewife. "I let them drop in anyway, I remember. I did mean to have them well shaken out of doors and properly folded, but that bother drove it all out of my head. Take them out, girl." Susan put her strong arms underneath the heap and lifted it out with a fling. Something heavy flew out of the curtains and dropped on the boarded floor with a crash. Letting fall the curtains, Susan gave a wild shriek of terror, and Miss Betty gave a wilder, for the floor was suddenly covered with shining gold coins. Mr. Cockermouth, passing across the passage below at the moment, heard the cries, wondered whether the house was on fire, and came hastening up. "Oh," said he coolly, taking in the aspect of affairs. "So the thief was you, Betty, after all." He picked up the ebony box and bent his head to look at the guineas. Miss Betty sank down on a three-legged stool bought in for Philip's children and grew as white as death. Yes, it was the missing box of guineas, come to light in the same extraordinary and unexpected manner that it had come before, without having been, as may be said, truly lost. When Miss Betty gathered her curtains off the dining-room table that March morning, a cumbersome and weighty heap, she had unwittingly gathered up the box with them. No wonder Sam Dean had not seen the box on the table after Miss Betty's departure. It was a grievous misfortune, though, that he failed to take notice it was not there. She had no idea she was not speaking truth in saying she saw the box on the table as she left the room. Having seen the box there all the morning, she thought it was there still, and that she saw it, being quite unconscious that it was in her arms. Susan, too, had noticed the box on the table when she opened the door to call her mistress, and believed she was correct in saying she saw it there to the last, the real fact being that she had not observed it was gone. So there the box with its golden freight had lain undisturbed, hidden in the folds of the curtains. But for Hester Knowles's defective window, it might have stayed there still. Who can say how long? Susan, no less scared than her mistress, stood back against the closet wall for safety, out of reach of those diabolical coins. Miss Betty, groaning and half fainting on the three-legged stool, sat pushing back her cap and her front. The lawyer picked up the guineas and counted them as he laid them flat in the box. 60 of them, not one missing. So Sam's guinea was his own. He had not, as Worcester whispered, trumped up the story with Maria Parslet. "John," gasped poor Miss Betty, beside herself with remorse and terror. "John, what will become of me now? Will anything be done?" "How done?" asked he. "Will they bring me to trial or anything of that in poor Sam's place?" "Well, I don't know," answered her brother grimly. "Perhaps not this time. But I'd have you take more care in future, Betty, than to hide away gold in old curtains." Locking the box securely within his iron safe, Mr. Cockermouth put on his hat and went down to the town hall, where the magistrates, after dispensing their wisdom, were about to disperse for the day. He told them of the wonderful recovery of the box of guineas, of how it had been lost, and that Sam Dean was wholly innocent. Their worships were of course charmed to hear it, Mr. Whitewicker observing that they had only judged Sam by appearances, and that appearances had been sufficient, in theory, to hang him. From the town hall, Mr. Cockermouth turned off to Sam's office. Sam was making a great show of business, surrounded by a table full of imposing parchments, but with never a client to the fore. His old master grasped his hand. "Well, Sam, my boy," he said, "the tables have turned for you. That box of guineas is found." Sam never spoke an answering word. His lips parted with expectation, His breath seemed to be a little short. Betty had got it all the time. She managed somehow to pick it off the table with those wretched old curtains she had there, all unconsciously, of course, and it has lain hidden with the curtains upstairs in a lumber box ever since. Betty will never forgive herself. She'll have a fit of the jaundice over this. Sam drew a long breath. You will let the public know, sir? Aye, Sam, without the loss of an hour. I've begun with the magistrates, and a fine sensation the news made amidst them, I can tell you. And now I'm going round to the newspapers, and I shall go over to Elm Farm the first thing tomorrow. The town took up the cause against you, Sam. Take care it does not eat you now in its repentance. Look here, you'll have to come round to Betty, or she'll moan her heart out. You won't bear malice, Sam? No, that I won't, said Sam warmly. Miss Betty did not bear it to me. She has been as kind as can be all along. The town did want to eat Sam. It is the custom of the true Briton to go to extremes. Being unable to shake Sam's hands quite off, the city would fain have chaired him round the streets with honours, as it used to chair its newly returned members. Captain Cockermouth, sent for post-haste, came to Worcester all contrition, beseeching Sam to forgive him 50 times a day, and wanting to press the box of guineas upon him as a peace offering. Sam would not take it. He laughingly told the captain that the box did not seem to carry luck with it. And then Sam's troubles were over, and no objection was made by his people, as it otherwise might have been, to his marrying Maria Parslet by way of recompense. God never fails to bring good out of evil, my dear, said old Mrs. Jacobson to Maria, the first time they had her on a visit at Elm Farm. As to Sam, he had short time for Elm Farm, or anything else in the shape of recreation. Practice was flowing in quickly, litigants arguing one with another that a young man, lying for months under an imputation of theft, and then coming out of it with flying colours, must needs be a clever lawyer. But, Johnny, Sam said to me when talking of the past, there's one thing I would alter if I made the laws. No person, so long as he is only suspected of crime, should have his name proclaimed publicly. I am not speaking of murder, you understand, or charges of that grave nature, but of such a case as mine. My name appeared in full in all the local newspapers, Samson Reginald Dean, coupled with theft, and of course it got a mark upon it. It is an awful blight upon a man when he is innocent, one that he may never quite live down. Suspicions must arise, I know that, of the innocent as well as the guilty, and they must undergo preliminary examinations in public and submit to legal inquiries. But time enough to proclaim who the man is when evidence strengthen against him, and he is committed for trial. Until then, let his name be suppressed. At least, that is my opinion. And it is mine as well as Sam's. The end. I hope you enjoyed that one. I enjoyed that one. Happy ending. And yes, the town did want to eat Sam. Goodness, indeed. But yeah, I really like that. And shake his hand right off, yes. I really like that one. Just like, he was innocent and it wasn't anybody else. Like, basically every time this box has gone missing, it's just carelessness. It's like, oh dear. But I guess a fairly decent moral tale as well. Just like, yeah. Try not to accuse people. Unless you actually have, a bit more evidence. Maybe. Stupid slippery box, exactly. Ebony. Slippery thing. It's a lovely tale. Curtains are more trouble than they're worth. That is indeed the moral of the tale. Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I thought that was quite fun. Cursed by minor mischief demons, exactly. So yeah. I thought that was fun. Oh boy, excuse me. And the mention of Susan in this, So I have, as I probably said the other day, have started reading Hogfather of the Discworld, because 'tis the season, and I'm just gonna read. I mean, I know a lot of you are Pratchett fans and probably have read Hogfather, but the mention of the character Susan in this has just reminded me of a bit in Hogfather, which amused me greatly. This is about a character called Susan. I'm just going to read you a little section because it's a fun thing to end on. She'd become a governess. It was one of the few jobs a known lady could do, and she'd taken to it well. She'd sworn that if she did indeed ever find herself dancing on rooftops with chimney sweeps, she'd beat herself to death with her own umbrella. After tea, she read them a story. They liked her stories. The one in the book was pretty awful, but the Susan version was well received. She translated as she read. And then Jack chopped down the beanstalk, adding murder and ecological vandalism to the theft, enticement and trespass charges already mentioned, but he got away with it and lived happily ever after without so much as a guilty twinge about what he had done. Which proves that you can be excused just about anything if you're a hero, because no one asks inconvenient questions. And now, she closed the book with a snap, it's time for bed. Which I rather like. You really like that Betty accidentally caused the box to be lost, but also be the one who finds it again through such an act of kindness and generosity. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Betty is great. But yes, I did enjoy that one. That little quote. I mean, like, all of Pratchett is immensely quotable, so yes. But yes, thank you all very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to see if our good friend Stephen is on to raid. He is. We haven't raided over to Stephen for a while, so I shall take us all. Where was this story from again? So it's from a collection called the... it was a part of a collection of short stories. So it is in a book that I have called A Century of Thrillers, which is like it's an old collection of short stories. But this story is from author Ellen Wood, and she has a series of short stories called Johnny Ludlow, which is the character, the narrator, basically. And she seems to have like 6 or 7 series of it. So, Johnny Ludlow she doesn't go by Ellen Wood, she goes by Mrs. Henry Wood, but I hate that. So I've been calling her Ellen Wood, which was her actual name. Look up her Johnny Ludlow series. And the link up in chat it will take you to the Gutenberg page for her stuff. What Andy Pants says. It's quite fun. I might have to delve into more of her stuff because I didn't realise she'd written so many things. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, thank you all very much for being here. I shall throw you over to our good friend Stephen, who is doing some demos today, which sounds fun. And yes, Sam should in theory be back on Saturday with more of the human chord. So more spookums for that. But yeah. Thank you all very much for being here. You're all wonderful people. Go take care of yourself and everyone around you. And we shall see you again soon. Thank you and good night.